North Dakota Republican Senator John Hoeven. He is one of the members of the Border Security Conference Committee. And as I said, Senator Hoeven, a conference committee in Washington, it is the rarest of sights. How a bill becomes a law is actually trying to become a law the normal way. What is your first take on today's meeting?
Well, it's a good sign. I thought it was a good meeting. Everybody agreed on the need for strong border security and talked in terms of people, technology, and a border barrier. Now, different people have different ideas of what that mix should be, but we're working on it, and hopefully we can get to something that has broad agreement. What role is the White House playing in the conference committee? I ask, like, is there people representing the White House point of view in the meeting, staffers? Well, clearly we're talking to the administration because at the end of the day, it's got, whatever we come up with has to pass the House, the Senate, and be signed by the president. So they're not actually part of the conference, but obviously we're talking to them to get to a package that we can get agreement on. I take it you're not going to support something in that committee that you don't first know the White House is okay with. Well, that's why we have to coordinate with them, because we need the presidential signature on it. And so we're going to try to get to something really that has the three components, people, technology, and a border barrier, that the White House feels is something they can support. Let me show you one of the president's tweets today on the wall, and curious what this impacts the negotiators. If the committee of Republicans and Democrats now meeting on border security is not discussing or contemplating a wall or physical barrier, they are wasting their time. Obviously, you just said a barrier is being negotiated. How should we read that tweet? Does that mean the president, if he doesn't get a barrier of a size that he wants, he's walking away? How should we interpret this? Well, he's already shown a willingness to compromise. Matter of fact, the compromise proposal he put out has a lot of things that Democrats want in it. So we can clearly get there. And one of the things I propose, and I think we're going to do this now as a committee, is get the border security professionals and their career people to come in and talk about that mix of people, technology, and border barrier. And I hope that takes the politics out and gets us to the best solution. How big will the compromise look? Sometimes in Washington, there's an old saying, if you can't figure out a way to get a bill passed, make it bigger, right? Make the deal larger. So how much of DACA is going to be into this? How much of the temporary protections is going to be in this? Does this get bigger? Does this start to look like Gang of Eight? Well, right now we're focused on the border security package and getting the remaining appropriations bills through for the full year, so that through September 30, we've got a lot of bipartisan agreement on those bills. Now, in terms of the overall package, we could stay more narrowly focused. Or if we go beyond that, one way to do it would be, you remember the president saying he's willing to have weekly bipartisan meetings at the White House on immigration issues. And Republicans have always said if we can get border security done first, then you can have those discussions, and he's offered to have those discussions. I've always heard that border security first, border security first. The problem has always been who decides when the border security has been implemented. I imagine that is among the topics you guys are trying to figure out. Exactly right. That's why it's good we're having this conference committee to try to do that. And again, then maybe we can get into kind of a step-by-step process to address a number of these issues. How do you define amnesty? Well, allowing people to, in essence, come to the country and not following the rules and requirements of coming here legally. And so that's something that we have to do, is make sure that that's addressed in a way where people feel it is not amnesty. Do you believe the problem with the word is, as you know, the definition? That's why I asked you for a basic definition in your form, because some people think what you guys supported in Gang of Eight, and you were a supporter of it, you helped tighten up border security elements to it. And I think you, among others, were arguing that what you were telling the DACA population, what it could do or not do, or at the time, I don't think we called them the DACA back then, was not amnesty, and yet many critics called it that. How do you deal with that issue? The key is going to my portion of the work in that legislation was border security, which is what we're working on now. And that's why I say we need the border security first. And then when you talk about, some type of permanent status, you make sure people go to the back of the line so you don't have amnesty, and people will support the package, the border security and the solution, because they don't believe it is amnesty.
Could you support the Gang of Eight bill today politically?
I think we have to have a bill that follows the president's 4 principles. And those principles are, we have to have border security, which includes some type of barrier, that we address DACA, but we also end chain migration and the visa lottery system. That's what he's put on the table, and that's what I think can get support. That's what I voted for in the Grassley bill last year when we voted on these issues.
I understand that. So what you're saying is, because Gang of Eight was for a different president, sort of a different makeup of the deciders, Republican House, Democratic Senate, Democratic President, does that make it harder to support?
We need to get something that can pass, and something that has the 4 principles the president laid out is the kind of package that hopefully can pass and that we ultimately can get to, starting with border security.
There's a whole movement to end shutdowns as we know it, right? To figure out how to legislatively make them impossible in some form, whether it's make sure payroll, the paychecks go out no matter what. Where are you on these bills?
Say that one. Ask that question again. Not sure.
The shutdown, the idea of trying to end shutdowns, make it legislative, right. Get rid of the ability to do it. Paychecks won't get interrupted, things like that.
Right.
What bill makes the most sense to you?
Well, there's a number of them, but Rob Portman's put forward a bill which I co-sponsor, and that would address it and make sure we don't have a shutdown. I think that's a good one.
All right. Senator Hoeven, I will leave it there. Good luck. It's nice to see sort of how a bill becomes a law actually play out the way the cartoon showed us it will. Maybe a conference committee can work. So good luck.
Thanks, Chuck.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.